Going to speak about poetry today, but I decided to postpone that. I had this other idea that kept buzzing in my head. And what I'm going to do is today is emulate one of my heroes, the late H.L. Mencken, as I talk about progress, the good, the bad, and the debatable. Jim and I are forever stumbling on examples of advancement that seem more like giant leaps backward to us. We shake our heads at headless mannequins, for instance, then one or the other of us invariably and mockingly utters the word progress. Just yesterday, I was trying, for instance, to print this paper with my Epson printer, and what came out is very strange, but I'm going to try to follow it. That's just one of a multitude of examples of progress. This is a new printer, and we keep wondering, what's next? As for Mencken, you're probably all familiar with the Sage of Baltimore. He was a cigar-chomping, acerbic journalist who loved to critique everything and everyone, the guy who coined the term Bible Belt. Among other things, Mencken could look past the razzle-dazzle of electrical wonders such as the telephone and radio and pinpoint their flaws. Even in 1922, he railed against nuisance calls. By 1931, he was berating the generally abysmal level of radio programs then available and the sordid touting, as he put it, of toothpaste, soft drinks, and such. And he certainly bad-mouthed prohibition. Mencken could see that progress inevitably had its downside. Frankly, it's hard to think of a dark underside to progress when it comes to such basics as the use of clothes washers and dryers and permanent press fabrics instead of having to wrangle with wash tubs, washboards, and flat irons, or when we contemplate the ease of flicking a light switch instead of cleaning filthy kerosene lamps. Before refrigeration, ice had to be chopped from lakes and ponds, then delivered via horse-drawn wagons for many years, at least in cities. As for cooking at open hearths, it led to some horrific accidents. And hooray for indoor plumbing. The back-breaking labor of the 19th and early 20th century left women especially with little time for leisure, little time or energy to read a book or write a book or to paint. Some progress is undeniably first-rate. We live in a different era, a time rife with dizzying numbers of ever newer inventions, and I do appreciate many of them. When I'm writing, it's a snap to make changes and corrections with a word processor. So far, that works better than my printer. My VCR, though I don't use it often, has enabled me to see some cinematic gems, such as Rossellini's Open City. Concerning seatbelts, I know they're pesky, but they do the job. But, like Mencken, I'm not sure that what passes for progress is always such occasion for joy. It seems that in the headlong rush toward newer and jazzier technologies in the last several decades, and toward greater efficiency, and toward a follow-the-leader type of conformity, we're tossing away too much of an older, more stable way of life. In the process, as manufacturing keeps escalating, our environment has become so mega-polluted that it's made millionaires of oncologists. Then there's the prettily packaged poisons of convenience foods that increase the litany of medical woes. Read the ages of the deceased in recent obituaries, the 20, 30, 40, and 50-somethings who keep dying. It's obvious that something's gone awry in our society. It's a strange type of progress that immerses us all in a veritable chemical soup. Greenery that's being destroyed all the time is another stark example of what occurs in the name of progress. It's happening in the rainforests of Brazil, but it's happening all around us as well. As Joni Mitchell sang in her famous song, they paved paradise and put up a parking lot. Think of how many more parking lots have come along since she penned those lyrics in the 60s. Just this weekend, I read about the plans of the University of North Carolina at Asheville to cut down 2.5 acres of prime urban forest in order to build a freshman parking lot. One inflamed local calls it, quote, part of the cancer that is eating away at our shrinking urban green space, unquote. But the university's sure to ignore her. It's more than the mere ugliness of parking lots that's at issue here. As too many trees are felled, ecosystems are becoming less healthy, providing less natural habitat for plants and animals. At the same time, the overzealous chopping down of trees leads to more flash flooding and low-flow drought conditions. In a mountainous area such as ours, too few trees also results in too much sediment and nutrients running off into streams. This kind of progress is a lose-lose situation for everyone involved. It's not only the great outdoors that's becoming steadily less great. Inside chain stores, CEOs may be gloating, but pity the poor customer. With most consumers now squandering discretionary funds rather indiscriminately as they purchase the artificially created necessities of the marketplace, it's easy to forget what really counts. Too many electronic gizmos in the home, and enthusiasts soon find themselves in debt and lamenting their many impulse purchases. To quote Mencken again from 1932, from the height of the Depression, mind you, we have fallen into the folly of mistaking luxuries for necessities, unquote. We even gravitate toward high-tech items that we don't own ourselves. If we're away from our home computers, for instance, the trend is more and more toward using public ones. Is there a competition as to who can log on the most time on that never-ending information highway? But with what consequences? Much of real life's being rapidly replaced by a wan imitation of life in the form of endless video games and computer games and chat rooms. Rather than pounding the keyboard keys at newfangled cyber cafes, I'd like to see people settle back and sip their cappuccinos or herb teas and mingle with others when they patronize cafes. Laundromats are beginning to have internet access as well. It's just too much electronic dependency for my taste, as well as eye drying, carpal tunnel syndrome inducing, and more exposure to electromagnetic fields. Why not read a newspaper at the laundromat? Why not revive the lost art of conversation with other towel-folding folks? Or meditate, or daydream? Personally, I usually enjoy my own company. I like to bat ideas and theories around in my head and sing some off-key songs, either silently or aloud. Many of you derive the same benefit from gardening. I like to reminisce about the past, savor the present, and anticipate the future. A modicum of silence as part of a balanced menu in my day's activities helps to center me. But much of that silent time is fast becoming extinct. In the warm weather, radios and tapes are blasting from cars and vibrating the very blacktop beneath them. That didn't used to happen. Turned-on TVs are ubiquitous. They're in doctors' waiting rooms, in restaurants, and often in stores. Too much flesh, too much violence, and shrill talk shows seem to assault me in almost every imaginable venue. The volumes often deafening as well to accommodate the increasing hearing loss of the earphone set. I refer, of course, to those who are lost without earphones, even while hiking or studying for exams. If they remove their earphones at all, they're quickly replaced by their cell phones. Cell phones are handy little miracles if your car breaks down on a desolate mountain road at midnight. But otherwise, the plague of cell phone-itis, as I call it, of immoderate usage even in restaurants, and worst of all, of irresponsible highway chatter that leads to crashes is definitely upon us. I keep thinking of all those electromagnetic fields as well, and the dramatic rise in brain cancers of late. I touched on the overuse of TV, but I do think the much maligned and often justly maligned contraption does have its place. Praiseworthy programming is still available. It's just that the percentage of what's worthwhile has probably dropped since Mencken decried low-level broadcasts over 70 years ago. The choices are certainly more numerous now, but isn't the availability of 20 gazillion program choices at all hours more daunting, more mind-numbing than enriching? Isn't it a stress in itself? And who needs such huge screens at home, or TVs attached to exercise equipment in gyms, or TVs in cars to entertain the little ones? Whatever happened to word games, or reading the states off of license plates, or enjoying the scenery, or good old-fashioned imagination to help pass travel time? I'm reminded of the fascinating talk Andy gave a few weeks ago on social entropy. If I understand the concept correctly, it refers to areas of progress that start out with great energy and then gradually dissipate unless they're infused with new sources of energy. I believe this idea applies to many changes our society has experienced, new and idealistic ideas that sink in time to lower levels. And cited the initially gung-ho civil rights movement of 40 years ago and the way its impetus, its energy, gradually weakened. But not all sensational-sounding changes are such a wow to begin with, no matter how much energy defines them. Some innovations or trends are dubious at best. For example, a more contemporary curmudgeon than Mencken, Andy Rooney, had this to say about the automotive way of life in the early 90s. Quote, "There are 123 million cars in the United States. We drive a total of 1,400,000,000,000 miles a year. Are we happier human beings since the automobile was invented and we can get more places quickly? There's no evidence this is true. When I was a kid, we drove to a summer place we had on a lake about 75 miles from our home. Much of the trip was on small, narrow dirt roads, and it took almost 4 hours. Once we got to the lake, we stayed for the summer. They built a 6-lane highway 25 years ago, and the trip takes 1 hour now. Is our summer vacation better because of the highway? It is not. Our secluded spot on the lake is crowded now, easily accessible to everyone, and we seldom go there anymore." Unquote. A perceptive man, that Andy Rooney. I think that in many ways we've been bamboozled by mercantile interests into believing that our unnatural, mostly machine-dominated existence is necessarily superior to the way things were for our parents and grandparents. We forget or don't think of the real costs of progress. Air conditioning's a case in point. If Freon from older units didn't sometimes leak and deplete the ozone layer, I'd give a qualified thumbs up to air conditioning. Yet its overuse would still be problematic, since all power usage leads to air pollution. In addition, the extraction of energy in the first place, be it oil, gas, or coal, always disturbs the earth. And are hermetically sealed office buildings a true advance for the health of our lungs? Though we may sweat less than previous generations, in the long run we may suffer even more. Email, now there's a winner. And indeed, I might understand all that hoopla surrounding it if speed and ease were all that mattered. I'd be a loyal email fan if email had the personal touch of a snail mail letter, and if it helped maintain at least minimal standards of spelling, punctuation, and grammar, instead of being its worst enemy. My personal peeve is the misplaced and beleaguered apostrophe, especially in the word ITS. Faxes. Well, if frequent junk mail didn't spew from fax machines, I'd call the fax fantastic. Still, it's a mighty pricey toy to own for many who don't really need their own. The Internet again, the multifaceted Internet. There's no simplistic answer here. Rather, the benefits of the most prized invention of our age are only half the story. But such benefits are amazing. Kudos to technology that allows the populace to research everything from today's news to health, science, literature, and genealogy. And college and university classes conducted via the Internet open up educational vistas that would otherwise be closed for many. But the flip side of the Internet use is also inescapable. Psychopaths faking their identity lure naive teens from their homes. the resultant human toll is mind-boggling in terms of kidnappings, rapes, and murders. Other psychopaths instruct still other psychopaths on how to make bombs and anthrax and ricin. And as we've all been made vividly aware by recent events, gore and terror beyond belief are now being disseminated on the internet, unedited. Evil and important data keep vying for attention on the web as the misuse of surfing proliferates. Are the internet's impressive benefits really worth its blood-curdling risks? When I think of the paradox of faults insinuating their way into what initially seems glorious, I rebel. The maddening sense of discovering the truth is an irritant. Am I the only one who has a microwave only because it came built in with a home purchase? Am I the only one who refuses to use it? Despite the obvious speediness of such food prep, my understanding is that it actually destroys food at the cellular level. It also alters the taste, and it's also a radiation hazard. I'd rather cut and chop and slow cook on my range. What about phone menus when you need to speak with a human? What about the demise of library card catalogs? I depended on those things. What about key cards that make hotel door locks impossible to open? Or if you go the cheap route to some certain motels, what about the hangers that are half attached to racks in many motels? They do prevent theft, but let you know you're considered dishonest. What about the plastic tables and chairs fastened to the floors of fast fooderies? And what about the incredible shrinking size of numerous products as their prices keep expanding? Does practicality alone justify such changes, such tampering with tradition? Are there no viable alternatives to consider? Like those truncated department store mannequins, all these changes represent the ultimate in sterility and in coldness to me. They symbolize a moving away from human values. When mannequins had heads, even the tawdriest model, the least pleasing example, had more personality than none. It seems ominously fitting that today's faceless dummies should replace more traditional ones in a time when humans are being reduced to mere numbers and when individuality counts for less and less. We can't go back in time, but to a reasonable extent, we can reevaluate our existence, lose our overdependence on a way of life that's further and further from all that's natural and safe. We can remember what Dr. Kendu, who spoke here last week, had to say about a healthy life. He reminded us that a healthy life is a holistic life, with equal attention given to mind, body, and soul. He spoke with concern of materialism, because a life guided by materialism will lose its holistic balance. But we're Unitarians. We're savvy thinkers. Like Mencken, we can use our heads and disdain all that would negatively impact us. We can support the great work of the Nature Conservancy, and we can heed the cautionary tales of those who've gone overboard in their machine mania, their obsessiveness, and perhaps lost a spouse who walked out. Although we're theologically liberal, some of us might even consider campaigning for a degree of censorship of public instructions on how to commit mass murder. Common sense and moderation should guide us. Let's be wise citizens of the 21st century as we enjoy the environmental riches that still remain to us, and as we tread a fine line in all that we do between benefit and harm.